All right. Welcome, everyone. Hope you're having a good day so far. Obviously, you already have been seeing a lot of talks everywhere. And hopefully, this one is just as good as some of the other ones that you have seen today. What we're going to talk about here is about sort of holistically looking at your marketing plans from a digital perspective and really looking at synergy and how that can help you get the most out of your campaigns. So therefore, the title, Synergise Your Digital Marketing Strategy for Greater Results. So I'll start off with a little bit about the agency that I work for, and then a little bit more about myself as well. So we're 8 Million Stories. We're actually the stand right there behind us, so if you ever want to say hi, then pop along. We've got beers later on as well. So founded in 2013, we're an independent agency, but all of us come from sort of larger network agency and have got a wealth of experience. We're incredibly passionate about what we do, and we love working on campaigns. And it's mainly sort of the global audiences that we're looking after, sort of for larger brands in specific. Also some awards that we won, and actually last night another one, so that one is not up here yet so far. So as I mentioned, we really look after global campaigns, and what I mean by that is that we've in a lot of countries and a lot of languages as well. So in total, we're looking after 52 countries, and within that many languages, across a large set of clients. When we're looking at ourselves, we're agnostic when it comes to the categories, so we don't really look after a specific category. And then a little bit more about me. So 15 years in digital marketing. Every photo that's being taken, I'm getting grayer and grayer, which is slightly frustrating. But yeah, background in paid media, but also a love for analytics and really driving overall results for clients. Because in the end, if a client is happy, then everybody else is happy as well. And within that, automation, so data and automation, and that's why you're sitting here. So we'll be touching upon that more later on. In addition, we'll be looking at Codex, and that is a tool that we've developed ourselves to bring data together to get more meaningful, actionable insights for you and your brand. A little bit more about me. You might hear me saying strange sentences or weird grammar mistakes. It's because I'm Dutch. I've only lived here for about 14 years, but still make mistakes. And I really do like a glass of fine wine. Unfortunately, we only have beers, but I'll be getting my own wine later on. So let's dive into it in a little bit more detail. And the landscape is getting more and more complex. So whenever you operate your campaigns, it is a lot more difficult than it was before. The user journey is just so much more fragmented. There's a lot more different platforms. There's a lot of different touch points that users now have and media options that weren't there before. And that's really important when taking that into account and when looking at synergy between the different marketing channels that you're using on your end. So by integrating all of these efforts, you can get a lot more meaning out of it, and in the end, also the overall results when it comes to revenue. So having that cohesive strategy is incredibly important for your brand. Now, what could one of those journeys look like? And all of these journeys are completely different, so I've actually overly simplified here. But users are across so many different more channels now than they were before, right? A user could start their search off normally, move to social media, a remarketing ad, and all of these touch points do play a role within the sort of strategy, but also within the marketing campaigns that you're running. In the end, we always like to convert the user to the most important thing. So why is it actually all important, these elements, to take into account? Like, why are we actually talking about this today as an important point? Now, overall, failing to have a really good multi-channel approach, really looking at all of these different channels together in a cohesive way, actually, if you don't do that, you miss out on 10% of the overall revenue. And when we're looking at sort of the other brands that do it a little bit less, it's about 3.4%. Now, who here feels that they've got a really good sort of omni-channel strategy? Is there anybody that holds their hand up and is like, we're really good at it, or some people that are a bit less? But yeah, most of us, maybe not as much, and the reason why is they miss basically the talent, the technology, but also the processes internally. So quite often things operate in silos. Think about sort of the paid media campaign specialist only looking at the paid media results and not actually taking into account that organic results matter just as much for them in their campaign. So overall, that makes it more likely to reach out for specialists that can help basically bring that all together. So only 5% of people would actually consider them being very good at this and being really able to look at this from a cross-channel perspective. So that 5% is of course not that high, so it's incredibly tricky to actually get these things right. And we'll dive into some of the really sort of key examples later on, because otherwise it's fun to hear about these stats, but it's more actually useful to have actionable insights off the back of it. So how can you actually do this with your brand? So connected thinking is key. It is incredibly important to look at all of these different aspects together as a team and with your agency or with another agency to do this in unison. So one, always make sure you reach users across the journey. As previously mentioned, if one of those points drops out, you miss out on actually converting that user. We've heard a lot of people here speak already about like how do you actually convert users when they're on site. The next one is tapping into different user behaviors. And we always tie it back to personas and an audience. Being aware of where your target audience is, what kind of channels are they most focused on? Is it Reddit? I'm a big Reddit fan myself because I recently got an allotment. Or are they more on Instagram looking at sneakers, which is also me again, because I do that a lot as well. But all of these different personas have different touch points and also different ways that they like to see the information. Is it short and snappy content? Is it longer form video? How do they actually want to engage with your brand? On top of that, keeping budgets fluid. So quite often, budgets are set in silos. So a PPC budget, a paid social budget, or an organic social budget, or content. And by actually having that budget in a much more fluid way, you're able to lift and shift where you can actually make a lot more difference to the overall campaigns. Then also important is having a clear measurement framework in place, making sure that when you set your overall objectives for your company, that each of these individual channels ladder up to those overarching objectives. And last but not least, ensure a constant brand experience, making sure that the tone of voice always aligns, making sure that you've got a creative messaging that aligns throughout the whole funnel, whether that is from paid social ads to display ads to any other sort of form that they have that touch point with you. So how can you then actually make this happen with your team overall? Now, first of all, you of course are going to need to collaborate. So having sort of brainstorm sessions together with on the teams, being able to share data between them as well, and we'll dive a little bit more into how we can share this data and how we can look at this all together. And then, of course, being able to test things and making sure that within those tests you look at external data, that you look at sort of having a valid hypothesis for that test, and then also the implementation post-testing. And it's very important that implementation post-testing, that it drives back to the collaboration again. It might be that you're dropping a little bit off from a paid perspective, and it makes the report for the paid media manager look a little bit less good. The organic side of things might pick up a little bit, and it's important to all be together and focus on that one core objective that you're trying to achieve. And that comes back to then sharing and being able to report internally, externally, making sure that everybody is on the same page when it comes to these objectives. Really sort of telling these success stories within the business and taking learnings as well. A failed test is still a good test because you're getting something out of it. You at least know that it doesn't work right now. So now a little bit more of the overall examples that are a little bit more in practice, right? Because these are all sort of, words and sentences. So what do you overall want to achieve? So you can have different ways of looking at yourself as a brand and what your sort of position is. Sometimes you're mainly focusing on growth, so you want to really dominate the SERP landscape. So you might want to expand on as many touch points as you can do. But another one could be focusing on profitability and really looking at balancing the different channels out in the best possible way. Because we should really not forget that a user actually only looks at the search engine result page, and that's the only way that they look at it. So how do we do this actually as an agency ourselves as well is when we look at the SERP results, then we really take that into account. And this is quite an old example, not even that old because there's older ones before I started, but overall you can see, there's the paid ads there in the middle, also on the right-hand side. And then underneath that, you've got the organic listings. And that now looks very, very different. Switching to dark mode, overall, you need to think user first. When people see this landscape, they see just an information page where they actually want to get something out of it. So really having, again, that holistic view between paid search and organic search is extremely important. And being able to understand the interactions that people have with this page is important for the data sharing between the teams together. So when you work together with your teams, you share the overall insights, it's important to think about what kind of metrics do I pull out of the different reports that align with each other. Clicks, for example, can easily align that between Google Search Console and the paid search query reports. Impressions, of course, overall, especially now that we're moving into a slightly different landscape from a search engine results page. But also things like click-through rate. What is the click-through rate that's different? And on the right-hand, the right-hand side, you'll see an image where we've lighted up a little bit more. Expedia, not one of our clients, but just an example that I found of two listings being incredibly close together, but also being incredibly different in the same time. Underneath it, though, there is a client that is ours, which is Turquoise Holidays. If you ever look for a great holiday, book with them. So now that we know these metrics that all align and that we can look through to actually get meaningful insights, then we need to sort of bring it back to like, what kind of other SERP results are there? Because there's a lot of different search engine results, and I don't want to say that it's just search that you focus on, because some people might be focusing more on e-commerce or other sort of aspects of the landscape. Now, on the left-hand side, again, my sort of priority was Nike trainers, and you can see that shopping results play a big role there, as well as PMAX. And on the right-hand side, you see an AI overview. And these are actually still important touch points, right? So when we're talking first about aligning metrics, clicks are not the only thing. An impression is still a moment that your brand has with you. So being able to be there and actually measuring that back is extremely important. Now, this is an example that previously was highlighted, and what can we actually learn from it? And I don't know because I don't have the data, but just to give an example of how we would analyze it, is looking at the click-through rates from organic search compared to paid search, we can take learnings out of that. We can take learnings out of the wording, what was better in this case, but we can also think like, well, should these two positions actually be as close to each other, or is there a reason to reinvest this budget from paid search perspective into other channels? What about automation, you might wonder then as well, because we spoke about the shopping results, PMAX, of course, which is a sort of more automated campaign type, and we're seeing a lot of people struggle with actually then tying it back to the overall results. But it's actually very simple. For the user, it's still just a query that they had at one moment. They just wanted to know something about you as a brand or about any kind of informational search. So when it comes to these kind of campaign types, we again should be looking to tie it back to the query of the user itself. So we spoke a lot about sort of paid search and reducing the overall visibility that we mentioned, or trying to balance that. So is that then the kind of only option that you can do or that you have as a brand? And the answer to that is no. So there's a lot more that you can do with this data. When you're looking at your Google Ads search query reports, they offer a wealth of information. So sharing that with the organic team is extremely important. Making sure that all of these questions that people have about your brand are noted, and that content is created around that. So whenever you now talk to the paid media team, making sure that they have got these search query reports available, sharing it with the organic team, and creating content around it can be a way to actually reinvest that budget that was set aside from a paid media perspective. The other one is prioritizing organic optimization. Especially when you're looking at your paid media campaigns, they give a wealth of information as to what is working and what is not. And actually focusing on those different sections will help you prioritize the right sort of keyword clusters within the organic optimization. Now, previously, I already mentioned that organic social plays a role and paid social plays a role as well. So overall, are there other data points that I can use within my strategy going forward? And of course, these paid search queries or organic search queries can also help inform your organic social strategy. In addition, simple but still effective, looking at overall Google Trends data to inform it as well, looking at the last 7 days, what is trending, and actually including that in your overall campaigns and the touch points of the user. And often, sometimes, these more easy methods are completely forgotten about when we're taking and looking at our overall sort of results. In this case, it was a rising queries for when is the actual best time to visit the Maldives. And as a luxury tour operator, I can actually use that for my campaigns and my audience because they clearly might have questions about when is the best time. Now, previously we spoke about those sort of 5 key points and being able to also look at your budget. And we've got a graph here which is completely fictive as well at the same time. But what we do is looking at these budgets over time and how search, basically, demand is changing over time. And that allows you, when you're working in this omni-channel way, to distribute the budgets in the best possible way. So it's important that when creating this synergy between the channels, whether that being paid social, whether that being remarketing, or whether that being paid search, that you're really looking at these periods of demand. For instance, in a period of low demand on the left-hand side, you might want to actually generate more of the overall demand and capture that. So you might upweight the upper part of your funnel. Whereas when it gets to more sort of increased direct demand, you focus and shift more of those budgets to remarketing tactics, whether that being social, whether that being paid, or whether that being display. And also important to take into account is what are your competitors doing overall within the landscape? Are they looking at increasing their budgets? And this can be viewed in auction insights reports from a paid media perspective. But we can also look at how many times actually somebody's looking for somebody's brand by looking at things like the Google Keyword Planner and, again, auction insights. So viewing these budgets holistically is incredibly important to actually get most of the results out of it. Being able to shift these budgets and not thinking in silos between your teams will help you actually generate the best of the results. And when tying it back to that 10% earlier, it is incredibly important to be able to do that, because otherwise your budget is not working as hard as it could do. Now, reporting this back to the business we mentioned was incredibly important. Being able to understand that overarching objective, being able to focus on growth together, regardless of the channel that you're actually looking at. So when reporting back, think about how much of the budget was actually saved, and how much of the redistributed budget actually did more work. What was the impact of that overall? Instead of reporting back on what did my paid media campaign deliver, what did the overarching business deliver as well? Because that might be different. And combining these channels together when looking at this. Another one could be how much overall growth was achieved. And that gets a little bit easier when you're looking at both of the channels together. So we've done this as well for our clients. So when looking at sort of what works well, so bringing it always back to an objective and to a hypothesis that you had at the start, of which one of them was reducing the visibility from a paid media perspective that we had on holidays to Tahiti, and actually reinforcing the sort of overall visibility in holidays to the Maldives. And with that, always try and identify these key metrics that you have, the really key metrics that you can look at to actually report this back to the business. I think with this, really important, keep it simple when it comes to the actual visual output as well. Don't deliver 16 graphs that are difficult to understand when you report back to somebody that's got 10 minutes to read an email. Keep it simple to a bar chart when reporting to overarching results, or when it's over a longer timeline that you did something, work with a simple timeline that actually visualizes that in more detail. Now, hopefully these were some of the examples that you can take back and that you can actually use within your overall strategy. But we already spoke about how this is actually quite an important but difficult thing to do because of technology, because of sort of the talent that there is, and also because of working together as a team. So that's why at 8MS, 8 Million Stories for short, we looked to how we could actually scale this in more detail, because these things are incredibly time sensitive, right? People are already busy managing their channels, so asking them for a lot more reporting, taking a lot more things in is incredibly difficult, and these opportunities arise more frequently as well. So being able to do this on a continuous basis is important. So again, being able to reduce time, weekly data refreshes, and reporting of downloadable data sets is incredibly important. So that's why we created and developed our own tool, our digital analysis and optimization tool named Codex, that actually aligns these data sets and that allows you to analyze this on a frequent basis in much more detail. Now, on top of these individual channels, we also need to look at like other data points that are there, because search engine results change all the time. So it is important to make sure to feed back. So we're actually getting external data sources, such as algorithm updates in there, to make sure that when we're doing forecasting based on machine learning of your own data, that's actually taken into account. And these are all proprietary models that we create as well, bespoke to a client. Identifying opportunities, and it could be paid opportunities or organic opportunities. And we've created sort of synergy reporting that allows us to easily monitor this for specific queries, as you see underneath it, with a proprietary ranking score to make sure that we focus our efforts on the things that matter most. And that can be different for each of you. It could be traffic. It could actually be revenue, but some other people focus on a strict CPA. So always being able to tying it back to your own sort of website is the most important. And we can see like there that we can analyze anything on a query level and combining this data together. The other one is the sort of organic opportunities when we spoke about sort of having these search query reports and aligning them. So in this case, again, on the left-hand side, we've got Google Search Console data. On the right-hand side, we've got paid media, paid search data, and being able to actually see how many people have got questions about your brand and what kind of questions do they have. So we divide them up into how, what, where, when, who, typical help queries that they might have, brand sentiment within that as well, and being able to then create content around that or have that inform your social strategy on top of it. The other one that I already mentioned were the sort of search interests, so I won't touch upon that too much longer. But what can you actually do right now as well from your end? So if you're running these multiple channels, make sure you set up reporting. Make sure that properties are linked to each other. And in this case, I've given Google Stack as an example, but you can do this across the board. You can also take it into far larger data repositories, such as Snowflake or Google BigQuery. But on top of that, make also sure that your departments are aligned, that they're able to communicate with each other, brainstorm, actually talk about these ideas that are there, and to get the most out of it. Create a reporting flow. Make sure that you've got a reporting flow that's set up on an ongoing basis each week, and making sure that you actually analyze the results within it, test and track, and then overall focus on the overall cross-channel reporting and making sure to report that overall back into the business. Now, hopefully some of these examples were useful to you. We're just there at stand C50. There's cold beers as well. We're kind of getting near the time that's okay at the end. So yeah, come and visit us if you want a demo, or if you want to talk more about sort of the holistic strategies that we are able to deliver from our end, then yeah, feel free to come along.